You wrote in your book that neighborhoods are supposed to be safe without drug dealers, and doctors, should do no harm. And that really struck me because that's not the case, right? In reality, drugs aren't being sold by drug dealers. They're being sold by doctors. And this is an epidemic. Talk about the Hippocratic Oath and the illusions of it.
Well, we can talk about many illusions. I mean, the illusion that the world is binary, that there are, drugs and medicine, that there are, doctors and drug dealers. The fact is that that's not the way it is. I mean, what does it take to be a doctor? It takes a medical education, a lab coat, maybe putting up your shingle. But if you are selling prescriptions in exchange for cash, as Dr. Lee was doing, are you still a doctor? What does it take to be a criminal, right? If you're an executive at a pharmaceutical company who is, deliberately mismarketing a drug in order to maximize profits, do you still deserve the status and the respect of society? So,
you talked about the marketing of this, in the 90s, I believe. What was Oxycontin's slogan?
The one to start with.
And the one to stay with.
Yeah.
I mean, granted, I'm hoping they changed that by now, right? Because, I mean, isn't that a really telling tagline? I mean, it's almost blatantly honest, right? Like the one to start with and the one to stay with. It's addictive.
The evidence was right there in front of us the whole time. As you say, the tagline gives the message. Richard Sackler, who was one of the owners of Purdue and who was effectively directing the marketing, said in the mid-90s that he wanted to unleash a blizzard of prescriptions so powerful that it would bury the competition. So again, those are words that are spoken in a boardroom by a guy in a suit with a medical degree who runs a pharmaceutical company, but he is telling you exactly what he's going to do. We just don't hear it that way. And a lot of people, were buried. They just weren't the competition. They were innocent people. So their discussion about addiction was the same way. Richard Sackler's line was that the drugs are good, the people are bad. Addiction only happens to people who have the wrong intent when they're taking the medication. The tricky part in our case was that we had all these laws on the books, and we had a doctor who was pretending to be a good doctor, who was pretending to follow the law. And we had to be able to prove that he wasn't. And in our case, we had, victims who had been patients of Dr. Lee who would see him and who, one, he would never ask the question whether they had ever suffered from substance use disorder. Two, if he ever asked, which was rare, they denied it. He knew they were lying. He had ample proof that they were lying. He even monetized their lies because he charged them more, depending not just on how many pills they wanted or how many different controlled substances they wanted.
What does a parent tell a kid? Hey, when you grow up, you got to become a lawyer or a doctor, right? And why? Because doctors are successful. They make lots of money. And so they're the last people in your mind that would actually have these side hustles to make even more money, right? So it seems like they would be the least greediest people out there. But here you have Dr. Lee, has a side hustle making money. How, from your experience, how prominent is this problem? How many crooked doctors could be out there?
Well, I hate to disappoint you, but a lot. And in fact, Dr. Lee was hardly the first. When we started investigating his case, we were looking for a roadmap for the prosecution because it was really something that our office hadn't seen yet. And there is a website managed by the DEA that has a list of every doctor charged and investigated across the United States with a controlled substance related crime. And it is a list that is hundreds of doctors long. And that doesn't even include the doctors who are investigated and charged at the state levels.
You described Dr. Lee having a regular job with no complaints.
So there was the facade of the shingle, the clinic, the white lab coat, the staff. But he only gave out numbered tickets. There were no appointments. It was a first come, first served situation. He also saw, up to 100 patients a day, usually 70, an average of 70, up to 100, sometimes more than 100. So again, that defies reality in terms of actually practicing medicine. His medical records were bare bones. And, most crucially, everybody who saw him got the same prescriptions, 120 oxycodone and 90 Xanax, no matter what their condition. So you have this sort of, the appearances are maintained, but there are these fissures that reveal what's actually going on.
Several questions that I have for you, but let's talk about that's so interesting. It's almost transactional. It's almost like a storefront. You go pick up your medicine and leave, because what was the average time that he spent with some of these patients? If he saw 100 patients a day on a weekend, like how long was he actually with these patients?
As one patient described it, just long enough to write out the prescription and take the cash.
How many people died under his care?
I think the full number may not ever be known. We discovered 16 patients who died of an overdose either while they were under his care or within a year of leaving his care. Now, then there was the question of what could we prosecute? We ultimately winnowed down to 2 cases where these 2 young men saw Dr. Lee, received prescriptions from him, were dead within 36 hours of having seen him, and they had died of an acute intoxication of oxycodone and Xanax.
Describe the economics of this. So you were saying that he was prescribing these prescriptions and getting cash, so it wasn't going through like insurance or anything like that. Describe the economics.
Absolutely. The economics were the key to everything, because we quickly understood that the only way to tell this story to the jury was through the money. So as early as 2004, when he first opened the clinic, he was committing insurance fraud. He had elderly patients coming in and he was billing Medicare and insurance companies, for multiple services when he'd only done one, or, inflating the cost. When Dr. Lee discovered that the opioid business could be very lucrative, it took him to a different level. So there, in addition to the insurance fraud, which he continued and which we were able to prove at trial, he set up a system where you only paid cash, no checks, no credit cards, cash only, where he charged different amounts of cash depending on how many pills you were getting per prescription, per controlled substance, and how many controlled substances you were getting. So it was $150, as a baseline, and then it could go up to to 200. Then there were also other thresholds for a higher fee. So typically a controlled substance prescription can only be filled once every 30 days. He knew that. If a patient came back before the 30 days, he charged them an extra $50 cash. And he would write that down in their medical records. So when you've gone to the doctor, have you ever seen your doctor? First of all, have you ever given cash to your doctor and seen them put it in the pocket of their lab coat? The worst one for me was that he charged an extra fee to patients who had suicidal ideation. Now, you may wonder, how would he know that? Well, some patients actually told him that they wanted to kill themselves and that's how they were going to use the medication, and he prescribed them anyway.
I was just doing the math. If he's charging $150 just baseline, right, just to go see him, and he's seeing 100 patients a day, that's $15,000 in a day. That's insane. Yeah. And that's just walking in. And not even all those other extra charges for suicidal thoughts. Right. And my God, that's horrible.
And that's on top of a salary that I think for most Americans would be, a comfort, right? $300,000 a year. That's a huge achievement. That is a very significant salary, but it's not
peanuts.
The greed makes it not enough.